If you thought that supply chain vulnerabilities were all about libraries, think again. In this video, I'm going to talk about how your developers might also be supply chain vulnerabilities in a major way. Let's get started, and let's get started now. On the 29th of September, ESET Research published a very interesting paper on how developers are being used to funnel in malware into major defense and aerospace companies all over the world. I think especially in the US, but I think this can be a trend that you'll see all over the world. Let's talk a little bit about how this happened, why this happened, and what it could mean to you. So here, this is the popular malware group known as the Lazarus group. Now, this is something that you would have probably seen from the WannaCry malware, the Sony Pictures attack, and all of that stuff. They are typically known to be associated with North Korea. But the Lazarus group has started to perform a very interesting set of attacks targeted specifically at developers. Now, this operation was called Operation Dream Job. As you probably have surmised from the title, it's basically based on how developers were tricked into believing that they were getting jobs. Now, let's look at how this actually happened. So apparently, a bunch of people posing as recruiters for large companies like Meta and so on contacted developers of these companies, probably in the defense and aerospace sector. We're still unclear about that, but this seemed to be targeting the defense and aerospace sector. So they contacted developers from these companies saying that, hey, I'm a recruiter from Meta and would you like to participate in a job interview and so on. And then they were lured into a job interview. Now, there were multiple things that were done to lure them. First of all, they had to open a specialized PDF viewer to view the job posting or the description, which was also a Trojanized PDF viewer. Once they kind of were interested in moving ahead, they were given coding challenges. Now, the very interesting thing about how these coding challenges were set up was that these coding challenges were basically set up as ISO downloadables that users downloaded onto their machines and then ran the coding challenge, which was basically a bunch of executables. So as a result, you see that this made its way into the organization's network. And then from there, the attackers were able to start gaining access to sensitive data within these defense and aerospace companies. So literally through coding challenges and developers executing these coding challenges, you started to see an inroad that was made from the malware group into these organizations. Now, you can clearly imagine that this is crazy. This is huge simply because so far, if you look at supply chain attacks, they were largely focused on compromising the update process of a particular software or compromising a library or compromising a Git repository or a CI/CD system and so on. I have typically not seen this kind of an intricate attack being played out against developers. Looks like this is the shape of things to come. It's basically social engineering towards a specific group. So the idea is they've clearly used a very specific set of things to do in terms of being able to embed malicious code inside these coding challenges, and this malicious code has triggered backdoors and things like that from that particular user's computer and made its way into the organization's network. Now, this has pretty large implications for all of us. First of all, this shows that attackers today are really after ecosystems. And this is something I've said multiple times in multiple talks. Attackers today are after ecosystems, which means that they want to gain access to that one thing that gives them massive return on investment. And clearly, developers, libraries, things like that are ways to get at that ecosystem. So let's say you're a developer working on a very popular Python library or Node.js library. If you're able to get into that developer's machine, then maybe you can have malicious code being added to a library that's used by millions of people. So you can think about the blast radius effect of something like this. It is pretty large. And obviously, this can have a pretty big impact. So a few things that you can obviously do to address something like this. Let's talk about that in the next part of this video. What you can do about your developers being victims of this sort of thing. Now, first of all, I think this sort of thing is something that it's always not possible to predict. And the idea is that when you have an incident like this, again, the best thing you can do is learn from incidents. And you should think about learning from this incident as well. So the first possible thing was, of course, educate people on this sort of thing happening. Maybe look at some ways in which people can verify people on LinkedIn or people that they're connecting to on LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn does have a way of verifying people's employment. And I think that does show up in their profile that verified as being employed at this place. So I think that may be one thing to talk to your people about. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, oh my God, but this is something that we are doing. If I talk to somebody about maybe somebody recruiting them, isn't that going to give them ideas? Believe me, they've got these ideas already. Your developers are probably getting approached by a bunch of recruiters. This is not new for them. This is something that they are constantly going to deal with. So don't think about all of these things. These are normal market patterns that you'll see. So at least better get ahead of the problem, talk to them about what they should look for when they use LinkedIn, especially when they connect to people, and encourage them to essentially not even connect to certain people if they don't find that they look suspicious in some way, shape, or form. Either they're not profile verified, or it looks like some kind of a fake profile with very few connections, or they don't have connections in the same company. All their connections seem to be from outside companies. Maybe there is something to do with that. So think about that and educate people, especially our developers, on this sort of stuff. The second thing that you can possibly do is basically try and have them probably have an acceptable usage policy where clearly talks about separation between their work and their recruitment or any other personal thing. So recruitment, when they want to get recruited, clearly it's a personal thing. So probably have a very clear discussion with people saying that, look, work machines, they have to be only used for work related purposes. Now, you can obviously beef up other things like your EDR, your maybe endpoint security, maybe think about how you can separate your networks that developers are using. All of that is stuff that you probably are doing, probably that you can do, probably that's something that you've already done. And maybe that's not effective in this case. I'm not sure how effective it has been for these companies and what they've done in order to protect themselves in all of these different ways. But maybe think about all of those things and maybe think about how you can apply additional security controls on all of these areas of technical security. But I really think that a lot of this really depends on how you engage with people and how you threat model these scenarios to say that, okay, what if this happens? Now, this has clearly happened to another company in our industry. What if this happens to us? How do we respond to this? What are the preventive, detective, corrective ways in which we can address some of this? So this is something that you should definitely be thinking about and definitely be looking to get ahead of the problem first through awareness, education, and then, of course, talking about some of the other technical controls, which will inevitably follow with all of these things. If you like content like this, please do like and subscribe to the channel. We keep putting out very useful content that hopefully helps you with your job, with your career, with your organization being better at application security. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in another one. Thanks so much.